The gleaming towers of Romano Industries pierced the Seattle skyline like silver daggers, reflecting the morning sun with an almost menacing brilliance. Inside the 47th floor, silence reigned supreme. Not the comfortable quiet of productivity, but the tense hush of fear. Employees moved through marble corridors with the careful precision of dancers on thin ice, their designer heels clicking softly against polished floors that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Isabella Martinez clutched her coffee cup with trembling fingers as she surveyed the conference room filled with nervous faces. As head of human resources, she had delivered many difficult announcements, but this particular Monday morning felt especially grim. The faces staring back at her belonged to some of the most qualified administrative professionals in the city, yet each wore the same expression of barely concealed dread. "Ladies, thank you for coming in so early," Isabella began, her voice betraying the slightest tremor. "As you know, we need a new executive assistant for Mr. Romano." She paused, watching several women instinctively flinch at the mention of his name. Rachel Thompson submitted her resignation on Friday afternoon. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Rachel had been the fourth assistant to quit in 6 months, lasting exactly 28 days, longer than anyone expected, but still short of the mythical 1-month mark that had become Romano Industries' urban legend. "Did she say anything before she left?" whispered Janet from accounting, her curiosity overcoming her usual professional demeanor. Isabella's expression grew somber. "She said working for Nicholas Romano was like being trapped in a beautiful cage with a particularly elegant predator." The comparison sent visible shivers through the assembled group. She also mentioned something about his eyes being capable of freezing coffee mid-pour. Margaret from legal raised her perfectly manicured hand. "What exactly does this position require, Isabella? Perhaps if we understood the specific challenges." "Perfection," Isabella replied, without hesitation. "Absolute, unwavering perfection in every task, every email, every breath you take in his presence." She consulted her tablet with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had given this speech too many times. "The successful candidate must arrive precisely 15 minutes before him each morning, maintain his calendar with military precision, and anticipate his needs before he knows them himself." Caroline from marketing shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "And if we make a mistake?" "He doesn't believe in mistakes," Isabella said quietly. "He believes in incompetence and excellence. There's no middle ground." The room fell into contemplative silence as each woman mentally calculated whether her mortgage payments were worth the psychological warfare that awaited whoever accepted this position. Romano Industries paid exceptionally well. The salary for this position could support a comfortable lifestyle, but the cost to one's sanity appeared to be equally substantial. The desperate graduate across town, Sophia Chen, stared at her laptop, screen with the determination of someone whose bank account had reached single digits. Her small apartment, shared with her best friend, Camila Rodriguez, bore the telltale signs of recent graduation poverty. Ramen noodle packages stacked like architectural models, textbooks sold, but their ghosts still visible in empty shelf spaces, and a coffee table covered with rejection letters from every major company in Seattle. "Another rejection," Sophia announced, waving her phone dramatically. "Apparently I'm either overqualified for entry-level positions or underqualified for everything else." She flopped backward onto their second-hand couch, which responded with a concerning creak that suggested its structural integrity was as questionable as her career prospects. Camilla looked up from her own laptop, where she was designing graphics for a small nonprofit that paid her in experience and occasional pizza. "What about that Romano Industries posting you mentioned yesterday, the executive assistant position?" Sophia sat up so quickly that the couch protested again. "Are you insane? That's Nicholas Romano we're talking about, the man who allegedly made his last assistant cry during a board meeting because she brought him the wrong brand of sparkling water." "Allegedly?" Camilla emphasized with a grin. Besides, you've never been one to back down from a challenge. Remember when you convinced Professor Harrison to let you rewrite that entire marketing campaign because you thought his version lacked emotional depth? That was different. Harrison was just academically intimidating. Romano is professionally terrifying. Camilla closed her laptop and fixed Sophia with that look, the one that meant she was about to dispense wisdom whether Sophia wanted it or not. You've been searching for 3 months. Your student loans aren't going to pause for your fear of difficult bosses. And honestly, Soph, you're probably the only person stubborn enough to last more than a month with him. Sophia considered this assessment. She had always been described as determined to the point of obstinacy, a trait that had served her well in college but seemed less useful in the professional world. Her professors had praised her ability to find creative solutions to impossible problems, her willingness to challenge conventional thinking, and her talent for remaining calm under pressure. The salary is incredible, she admitted, pulling up the job posting again. Like, pay off my loans and actually eat real food, incredible. See? And how bad could it really be? He's just a person, not a mythical beast. Sophia stared at the job. Description. Reading between the lines of corporate speak. Must excel under pressure clearly meant must function while being systematically destroyed. Attention to detail required obviously translated to one misplaced comma will result in professional execution. Flexible schedule, undoubtedly, meant your life now belongs to this company. Yet something deep in her chest, perhaps desperation, perhaps foolish optimism, began to stir. She had not spent 4 years studying business and communications to settle for a job filing papers in some forgotten office building. If Nicholas Romano was as impossible as everyone claimed, then perhaps what he needed was someone equally impossible, to intimidate. Fine, she declared, her fingers already moving toward the application button. But if I don't survive this, I want you to write something nice on my tombstone. Something about how I died pursuing my dreams instead of settling for mediocrity? Deal, Camilla laughed. But I'm also going to add that you were too stubborn to admit when you were in over your head. The interview of disasters. The Romano Industries building loomed before Sophia like a glass mountain, its surface reflecting the gray Seattle sky in a way that made the entire structure appear to shimmer with otherworldly energy. She had spent 2 days preparing for this interview, researching every article about Nicholas Romano, studying the company's history, and practicing answers to questions that might determine her financial survival. Her outfit, a charcoal gray suit borrowed from Camilla, and shoes that pinched her feet but looked professional, had been selected with the strategic precision of a military operation. She carried a leather portfolio that contained multiple copies of her resume, letters of recommendation, and a small notebook where she had written potential questions and talking points. The lobby was an exercise in intimidating elegance. Marble, floors polished to mirror perfection, stretched beneath soaring ceilings decorated with modern art that probably cost more than her college education. A waterfall cascaded down one wall with a sound like whispered secrets, while enormous flower arrangements stood like floral sentries at strategic points throughout the space. Sophia Chen for Isabella Martinez, she announced to the receptionist, a woman whose perfection seemed almost supernatural. Every hair was in place, her makeup appeared to have been applied by a professional artist, and her smile was so practiced, it could have been patented. Take the express elevator to the 47th floor, the receptionist instructed, with the kind of crisp efficiency that suggested she had given these directions many times. Mrs. Martinez is expecting you. The elevator. Ride felt like ascending into another dimension. Each floor displayed numbers in elegant gold lettering, and soft classical music played overhead, the kind of refined atmosphere that made Sophia suddenly aware of every sound she made, from her breathing to the slight rustle of her suit fabric. When the doors opened on the 47th floor, she stepped into what could only be described as corporate paradise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, while the interior design combined modern sophistication with subtle warmth. Everything was perfectly placed, perfectly clean, perfectly intimidating. Isabella Martinez approached with the hurried step of someone perpetually behind schedule. She was a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes that seemed somewhat apologetic, as if she were constantly sorry for whatever was about to happen to the people she met. "Sophia, thank you for coming. I know this was short notice." Isabella's handshake was firm but brief. "I have to be honest with you, this position is challenging. Mr. Romano has very specific expectations." "I understand," Sophia replied, following Isabella down a corridor lined with abstract paintings that probably had deep meaning she could not begin to comprehend. "I've done my research on the company. Romano Industries has an impressive track record of innovation and growth." Isabella paused at a heavy oak door, her hand resting on the handle. "That's true, but working directly with Mr. Romano is different from working for the company. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But he's also—" She searched for diplomatic words. "Demanding, uncompromising. He expects excellence in everything, and his definition of excellence is quite specific." "I work well under pressure," Sophia said, though she was beginning to wonder if she truly understood what pressure meant in this context. "We'll see," Isabella murmured, opening the door to reveal an office that took Sophia's breath away. Thus, space was enormous, with windows that seemed to capture the entire sky. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, its surface so clean it appeared unused. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that suggested serious scholarship. The furniture was elegant, but minimal, creating an atmosphere of sophisticated restraint. And behind the desk sat Nicholas Romano. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair that was perfectly styled and eyes the color of winter storms. His suit was obviously custom-made, fitting his tall frame with the precision of armor. When he looked up from his computer, his gaze was so intense that Sophia felt like a specimen being examined under a microscope. "Sophia Chen," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people automatically straighten their spines. "Graduated summa cum laude from University of Washington with a degree in communications and business. Internship experience with 3 different marketing firms. Currently unemployed for—" He glanced at her resume. 3 months. The way he stated these facts made them sound like accusations. Sophia forced herself to maintain eye contact, though his stare was like looking directly into an Arctic wind. "Yes, sir. I've been selective about opportunities, looking for a position where I can make a meaningful contribution." "Selective," he repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. "How interesting. And what makes you think you can contribute meaningfully?" "Here, Miss Chen." Before she could answer, the universe decided to demonstrate its sense of humor. As Sophia reached for her portfolio, her elbow knocked into the coffee cup that Isabella had placed on the side table. The cup tilted, then fell, sending a cascade of dark liquid directly onto Nicholas Romano's pristine white shirt. Time seemed to freeze. The coffee spread across the expensive fabric like a slow-motion explosion, staining the perfect shirt with dark, irreversible damage. Isabella gasped audibly. Nicholas stared down at his ruined shirt with an expression that could have turned water to ice. "I am so sorry," Sophia began, reaching instinctively for napkins that did not exist. "I can pay for cleaning, or replacement, or whatever." Nicholas stood slowly, his movements controlled, but somehow more menacing because of their precision. He removed his suit jacket and began unbuttoning the stained shirt with mechanical efficiency, revealing a white undershirt that only emphasized his broad shoulders and athletic build. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. In the 60 seconds you have been in my office, you have managed to destroy a shirt that costs more than most people's monthly salary." He dropped the ruined shirt onto his desk, like evidence in a criminal trial. "This does not suggest the kind of attention to detail I require in an assistant." Sophia felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but something deeper than shame began to stir in her chest. A stubborn refusal to be completely destroyed by one accident. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Romano. I should have been more careful. But I'd like to point out that in those same 60 seconds, I also demonstrated quick reflexes, genuine concern for taking responsibility, and an ability to remain relatively calm under extreme pressure." Isabella looked like she might faint. Nicholas tilted his head slightly, studying Sophia with newfound interest. "Relatively calm," he repeated. "Well, I didn't run away or burst into tears," Sophia said, surprised by her own boldness. "Though, I admit those were both tempting options." Something shifted in Nicholas's expression. Not quite a smile, but a slight loosening of the rigid control he maintained over his features. "Isabella, please see that Miss Chen receives the employment." "Paperwork. She starts Monday at 7:30. Isabella's mouth fell open. "Sir, are you sure? She ruined my shirt, and then convinced me it was a demonstration of her qualifications," Nicholas said, reaching for a fresh shirt from what appeared to be a closet concealed behind one of the bookcases. "That level of audacity might actually be useful around here." Sophia stared at him in disbelief. "Are you offering me the job?" "I'm offering you the opportunity to last longer than 28 days, Miss Chen. Whether you succeed or become another cautionary tale remains to be seen." As Isabella hurried her out of the office, Sophia caught one last glimpse of Nicholas Romano. He was putting on his fresh shirt with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. But there was something different in his posture, a slight relaxation that suggested her coffee disaster had somehow passed whatever test she had not known she was taking. "Well," she whispered to herself as the elevator doors closed, "this should be interesting." The first 2 weeks at Romano Industries felt like living inside a perfectly orchestrated hurricane. Sophia arrived each morning at exactly 7:15, 15 minutes before Nicholas, as instructed. She had memorized his coffee preferences: double espresso, no sugar, served at precisely 140 degrees, learned the names and personalities of every important client, and developed an internal radar for his moods that was more accurate than the weather forecast. Nicholas Romano was exactly as advertised: demanding, precise, and completely unforgiving of mistakes. He spoke in clipped sentences that contained no unnecessary words, expected tasks to be completed before he finished explaining them, and had never once said please or thank you. Yet somehow, Sophia found herself oddly fascinated by the challenge he presented. "Miss Chen," his voice cut through her morning routine as she organized his schedule. "The Peterson account files are 30 seconds behind schedule." Sophia glanced at her watch. It was 7:32. She had been in the office for 17 minutes, and he was already finding fault with her timing. Instead of feeling defeated, she experienced a strange surge of determination. "You're absolutely right." "Mr. Romano," she replied, pulling up the files with practiced efficiency. "Though I should mention that Mrs. Peterson called this morning to reschedule tomorrow's meeting. She's dealing with a family emergency. I took the liberty of moving the Henderson presentation to that slot instead, since they've been trying to get on your calendar for 3 weeks. Nicholas paused in his review of overnight emails, his gray eyes focusing on her with laser intensity. "You rearranged my schedule without consulting me." "I made an executive decision based on priority assessments and client relations," Sophia corrected smoothly. "But if you prefer to have gaps in your calendar while important clients wait, I can certainly change it back." For a moment, the office fell into complete silence. Sophia held her breath, wondering if she had finally pushed too far. Then Nicholas returned to his emails with what might have been the ghost of approval in his expression. "The Henderson meeting stays," he said quietly. As the days passed, a strange rhythm developed between them. Nicholas would issue impossible demands with unrealistic timelines, and Sophia would somehow manage to exceed his expectations while maintaining a cheerful demeanor. That seemed to both puzzle and intrigue him. She learned to anticipate his needs with almost supernatural accuracy, appearing with documents before he asked for them, scheduling calls moments before he decided they were necessary. But the real breakthrough came during their first late-night work session. The crack in the armorette was nearly midnight on a Thursday when Sophia knocked softly on Nicholas's office door. She had been working on a presentation for their biggest client, incorporating changes he had requested that afternoon. The building was empty except for security guards and the cleaning crew, creating an atmosphere of intimate isolation. 47 floors above the sleeping city. "Come in," Nicholas called, his voice rougher than usual with fatigue. She found him standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The city lights sparkled, below them like scattered diamonds, and for the first time since she had started working for him, he looked almost human. "The Morrison presentation is ready for your review," she said, placing the tablet on his desk. "I incorporated all your suggestions and added some additional market analysis that I thought might be relevant." Nicholas turned from the window, and Sophia was startled to see exhaustion etched into his usually impassive features. "What time is it?" "Just past midnight." He ran a hand through his dark hair, disturbing its perfect styling for the first time in her memory. "You should have gone home hours ago, Miss Chen. This could have waited until morning." "So could your review of the quarterly reports," she pointed out, noticing the stack of documents on his desk. "But here we both are." Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps, that she had noticed his own dedication to the impossible standards he set. He moved to his desk and began reviewing her presentation, his brow furrowing with concentration as he absorbed the information. "This analysis of the Southeast Asian market," he said after several minutes. "Where did you get these projections?" "I spent some time researching economic trends and consumer behavior patterns," Sophia explained, moving closer to point out specific data points. "I noticed that their previous expansion attempts failed because they didn't account for regional preferences in packaging and marketing. I thought a more localized approach might be worth considering." Nicholas looked up at her, and for the first time she saw something other than professional assessment in his eyes. There was genuine interest, even a hint of admiration. "You spent your own time researching market conditions for a client presentation?" "I wanted to make sure it was perfect," she said simply. "Most assistants would have done exactly what I asked and nothing more. I'm not most assistants." The words hung between them in the quiet office, loaded with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of how alone they were, how the normal rules of their professional relationship seemed different in the intimate lighting of the late-night office. "No," he said softly. "You certainly are not." Sophia felt her pulse quicken under his gaze. This close, she could see flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could notice the way his shirt stretched across his chest when he moved. The air between them seemed charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with their working relationship. "I should let you get back to work," she said, though she made no move to leave. "Sophia." The sound of her first name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. He had never called her anything but Miss Chen before. "Why do you work so hard? Really?" The question caught her off guard with its unexpected intimacy. "I told you during my interview. I want to make a meaningful contribution." "That's what you're supposed to say. I'm asking what you really want." She considered deflecting, giving him another professional answer that would maintain the careful boundaries they had established. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. "I want to prove that I belong here, that I'm not just some desperate graduate who got lucky with a coffee spill. I want to show that I can match you, that I can keep up with whatever impossible standard you set." She paused, then added more quietly, "I want you to respect me." Nicholas stood slowly, moving around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. The space between them was measured in inches rather than feet, and Sophia could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that made her think of winter mornings and clean snow. "You have my respect," he said, his voice low and rough. "You've had it since the day you convinced me that ruining my shirt was a job qualification." The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Sophia felt her breath catch as Nicholas reached up to touch her face, his fingers tracing the line of her cheek with surprising gentleness. "This is complicated," she whispered. "Everything worthwhile is complicated," he replied, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. "The business trip. The Miami conference was supposed to be strictly professional. 3 days of presentations, networking, events, and strategic meetings that would determine Romano Industries' expansion into the luxury hospitality market. Sophia had booked separate rooms, arranged all the logistics, and prepared detailed itineraries that accounted for every minute of their time. What she had not prepared for was the way Nicholas looked in casual clothes. She met him in the hotel lobby wearing a simple sundress and sandals, her usual professional armor replaced by something softer and more feminine. When she saw him approaching in khakis and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie in sight, she felt her carefully maintained composure waver. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, and even his voice seemed different, less commanding, more conversational. The restaurant he had chosen was elegant but relaxed, with tables scattered across a terrace overlooking Biscayne Bay. Soft jazz music drifted from hidden speakers, and the warm Miami evening wrapped around them like silk. For the first time since she had started working for him, their conversation wandered away from business into more personal territory. "You never talk about your family," Sophia observed over dessert, twirling her spoon through chocolate mousse that was almost too beautiful to eat. Nicholas's expression grew guarded. "There's not much to discuss. My parents died in a car accident when I was 25. I have a younger brother, James, but we don't speak often. I'm sorry about your parents. That must have been devastating." "It was complicated," he said, echoing her words from their late-night encounter. "They built Romano Industries from nothing, worked 18-hour days, sacrificed everything for success. When they died, I inherited not just a company, but an expectation to continue their legacy." "Is that what you wanted, to run the company?" Nicholas was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water where boats moved like distant stars. "I wanted to be an architect. I used to spend hours sketching, buildings, dreaming about creating spaces where people could live and work and find happiness." His smile was rueful. "My father called it impractical, said the family business needed someone serious, someone who understood responsibility. So you gave up your dreams." "I traded them for duty. Sometimes I wonder if that was the right choice." Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand, a gesture that was both comfort and connection. "It's never too late to change course. You could hire someone to run the company, pursue architecture part-time, and disappoint everyone who depends on Romano Industries. All our employees, our clients, our shareholders." He shook his head. "Some choices can't be undone, Sophia." The use of her first name sent that familiar flutter through her chest. Over the past weeks, their relationship had shifted in subtle ways. Longer conversations, shared glances, moments of connection that went beyond professional collaboration. But this dinner felt different, more intimate, like they were finally acknowledging the undercurrent that had been building between them. Walking back to the hotel, they moved slowly through the warm night air, neither wanting the evening to end. The Miami streets were alive with music and laughter, creating a backdrop that felt magical and separate from their usual world of boardrooms and conference calls. "Thank you," Nicholas said as they reached the elevator bank in the hotel lobby. "For what? For listening. For not telling me what I should do or how I should feel. Most people have opinions about my choices." "Your life, your choices," Sophia said simply. "I'm just honored that you shared them with me." The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside together. As the doors closed, the space suddenly felt impossibly small, filled with tension that had been building for weeks. Sophia was acutely aware of Nicholas standing beside her, of the way his presence seemed to fill every available inch of air. "Sophia," he said softly, and when she turned to look at him, she saw something in his eyes that made her pulse race. Nicholas. He reached for her then, his hands framing her face, as he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her the opportunity to pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with a passion that surprised them both. When the elevator dinged at her floor, they broke apart, both breathing heavily. Sophia's lips felt swollen, and she could see her own desire reflected in Nicholas's eyes. "This changes everything," she whispered. "I know. We work together. This could complicate things." "Everything worthwhile is complicated," he repeated his earlier words, his thumb tracing her cheek. "The question is whether it's worth the risk." Sophia stepped back as the elevator doors opened, her heart pounding with equal parts desire and uncertainty. "Good night, Nicholas." "Good night, Sophia." As the doors closed between them, Sophia leaned against the wall of the corridor, her mind spinning with the implications of what had just happened. She had spent weeks building professional walls between them, maintaining appropriate boundaries, telling herself that her growing feelings were just admiration for his brilliance and dedication. But that kiss had shattered every wall she had built, leaving her exposed and vulnerable and completely uncertain about what came next. The morning after. The next day brought a return to professional formality that felt almost jarring after the intimacy of the previous evening. Nicholas was back to his usual crisp efficiency, discussing schedules and presentations as if nothing had changed between them. But Sophia caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, and she felt the memory of his kiss every time their hands accidentally brushed while exchanging documents. The final presentation to the hotel chain executives went flawlessly. Sophia had prepared comprehensive materials that addressed every possible concern, and Nicholas delivered the information with his characteristic blend of confidence and precision. When they secured the contract, a deal worth several $1 million, the celebration felt both professional and intensely personal. "Excellent work," Nicholas said as they packed up their materials, his voice carefully neutral but his eyes warm with something that went beyond professional appreciation. "Thank you. I think this partnership will be very successful for Romano Industries." "I think," he said quietly, "that successful partnerships require trust, communication, and mutual respect." The words seemed to carry layers of meaning that had nothing to do with business contracts. Sophia felt her cheeks warm as she recognized the implication. Their flight back to Seattle was delayed by thunderstorms, leaving them stranded in the airport for several hours. They found a quiet corner of the first-class lounge, and somehow the conversation turned personal again, as if the Miami air had given them permission to be honest with each other. "I need you to know," Nicholas said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "that what happened last night wasn't just about the moment or the setting. I've been thinking about you, about us, for weeks." Nicholas. Sophia looked around. The lounge, conscious of the other travelers nearby. We should be careful about this conversation. You're right. But when we get back to Seattle, I'd like to take you to dinner. Not for business, not as your employer, as a man who would very much like to know you better. The invitation hung between them like a gift she wasn't sure she should accept. Dating her boss violated every principle of professional conduct she had ever learned. It could complicate their working relationship, damage her reputation, even cost her the job she had worked so hard to secure. But when she looked into Nicholas's eyes, she saw something she had never expected to find there. Hope, vulnerability, and a genuine desire for connection that went far beyond their professional relationship. "One dinner," she said finally, "but we need to establish ground rules. Clear boundaries between work and personal time." "Agreed," Nicholas said, his smile transforming his entire face. "Though I should warn you, I'm not very good at following rules." "Then it's lucky for you that I'm excellent at making them," Sophia replied, surprised by her own boldness. As their flight was finally called, Sophia realized that everything was about to change. The careful professional relationship they had built was evolving into something much more complex and potentially dangerous. But as she watched Nicholas gather his belongings with that familiar precision, she found that she was looking forward to discovering what came next, even if it meant breaking every rule she had ever made for herself. The dinner date happened on a Friday evening at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in Pike Place Market, far from the corporate world where they spent their days. Nicholas had chosen the location carefully, intimate enough for meaningful conversation, but public enough to maintain propriety. He arrived before her, had already secured a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. Sophia felt nervous, in a way that had nothing to do with professional performance. She had chosen a simple black dress that was elegant but not overly formal, and she had spent an embarrassing amount of time selecting jewelry that seemed appropriate for a date that was simultaneously first and forbidden. "You look beautiful," Nicholas said as she approached the table, rising to pull out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy that surprised her. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." Out of his usual business attire, wearing dark jeans and a sweater that made his gray eyes seem almost blue, Nicholas looked younger and infinitely more approachable. The transformation was so complete that Sophia had to remind herself this was the same man who had terrified an entire building full of employees. Dinner conversation flowed with surprising ease. Away from the constraints of their professional roles, they discovered shared interests in books, travel, and obscure documentaries about historical architecture. Nicholas told stories about his college years that revealed a dry sense of humor Sophia had never suspected, while she shared tales of growing up as the daughter of immigrant parents who had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they had never had. "My mother cleaned office buildings at night to pay for my college applications," Sophia said over wine that probably cost more than her monthly groceries. "She used to say that America was the land where dreams came true if you worked hard enough to deserve them." "Do you think she was right?" Nicholas asked, his fingers playing with the stem of his wine glass. "I'm sitting in an expensive restaurant with a billionaire CEO who kissed me in an elevator," Sophia replied with a smile. "I'd say her theory is holding up pretty well." Nicholas laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face and made several nearby diners turn to look. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather like a fairy tale." Fairy tales usually involve more magic and fewer employment contracts. Perhaps magic is just another word for unexpected possibilities. The words carried weight that had nothing to do with casual conversation. As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself falling for this version of Nicholas. Relaxed, funny, genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. This was the man who had once dreamed of designing buildings, who still carried architectural sketches in his wallet, who admitted to sometimes driving past construction sites just to imagine what he might have created. When he walked her to her car, the Seattle evening was crisp and clear, the kind of night that made the city feel magical despite its urban edges. They lingered by her car, neither wanting the evening to end. "I had a wonderful time," Sophia said, conscious that they were crossing lines that could never be uncrossed. "So did I. More wonderful than I expected, actually." "What did you expect?" Nicholas smiled, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I expected to spend the evening thinking about work, checking my phone, finding excuses to cut things short." His thumb traced her cheek. "Instead, I haven't thought about business once in the past 3 hours. Is that good or bad?" "It's terrifying," he admitted, "and absolutely perfect." This time, when he kissed her, there was no elevator urgency, no stolen moment of passion. This kiss was slow and deliberate, a promise and a question combined. Sophia felt herself melting into his embrace, her hands finding their way to his chest, where she could feel his heart beating as rapidly as her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. "This is dangerous," Sophia whispered. "The best things usually are. Office dynamics, maintaining professional boundaries at work while navigating a secret romantic relationship proved to be even more challenging than either of them had anticipated. They established rules: no personal conversations during business hours, no physical contact beyond necessary professional interaction, and absolutely no indication to their colleagues that anything had changed between them. But the rules were harder to follow than to make. Sophia found herself hyper-aware of Nicholas's every movement, every glance, every inflection in his voice when he spoke to her. The simple act of handing him files became charged with electricity when their fingers brushed. Standing close enough to review documents on his computer meant breathing in his cologne and fighting the urge to touch him. Nicholas seemed to be struggling with similar challenges. She caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, and his professional requests began to include subtle compliments that walked the line between appropriate feedback and personal appreciation. "Excellent work on the Morrison account. Follow up," he said one Tuesday morning, his voice carrying just enough warmth to make her pulse quicken. "Your attention to detail continues to exceed my expectations." "Thank you, Mr. Romano," she replied, maintaining the formal address they had agreed upon during business hours. "I'm glad you're satisfied with my performance." The word performance seemed to hang in the air between them, loaded with implications that had nothing to do with quarterly reports. Nicholas's eyes darkened slightly, and Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks as she recognized her unintentional double entendre. "Your professional performance," Nicholas clarified with the ghost of a smile, "is exemplary in every regard." Their secret continued through stolen dinners, weekend text conversations that had nothing to do with work, and carefully planned encounters that allowed them to explore their growing connection without jeopardizing their professional relationship. Sophia discovered that Nicholas was an accomplished cook who found peace in creating elaborate meals, while he learned that she wrote poetry in her spare time, verses about city lights and dreams deferred that made him see her intelligence in new dimensions. 3 weeks into their clandestine romance, Sophia realized she was falling in love with him. Not with the powerful CEO or the demanding boss, but with the man who called her at midnight just to hear her voice, who remembered that she preferred white chocolate to dark, who listened to her opinions about everything from office efficiency to social justice with genuine interest and respect. The realization terrified her. On a Wednesday morning that started like any other, Sophia arrived at the office to find Isabella Martinez waiting by her desk with an expression of barely controlled. "Panic! Sophia, thank goodness you're here," Isabella said, her usual composure clearly strained. "We have a situation." Before Sophia could ask for clarification, the elevator doors opened to reveal a woman who could only be described as absolutely stunning. She was tall and elegant, with platinum blonde hair styled in a perfect chignon, and a figure that made her designer suit look like it had been created specifically for her body. Everything about her screamed money, sophistication, and the kind of effortless beauty that appeared on magazine covers. More concerning than her obvious attractiveness was the way she moved through the office, with the confidence of someone who belonged there, who had every right to be in this space. "Good morning, Isabella," the woman said, her voice carrying the cultured tones of expensive education and international travel. "I trust Mr. Romano is available. We have quite a lot to discuss." Isabella's face went pale. "Ms. Victoria Ashford, I wasn't expecting you. Mr. Romano didn't mention you would be visiting." Victoria Ashford. The name hit Sophia like a physical blow. She had heard whispers about Nicholas's former fiancée, rumors about a relationship that had ended abruptly 2 years ago under circumstances that no one discussed openly. But seeing her in person was entirely different from imagining her. "Nicholas has always been full of surprises," Victoria said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure he'll make time for me." Without waiting for permission, Victoria walked directly toward Nicholas's office, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of a countdown timer. Sophia watched helplessly as this woman, this perfect, polished woman who clearly had history with Nicholas, disappeared behind the heavy oak door. For the next 2 hours, Sophia tried to focus on her work while the door to Nicholas's office remained firmly closed. She could hear voices through the thick walls, though she couldn't make out words. The tone seemed alternately heated and intimate, and with each passing minute, her anxiety grew stronger. When Victoria finally emerged, her expression was triumphant in a way that made Sophia's stomach clench with dread. "Sophia, isn't it?" Victoria said, approaching her desk with predatory grace. "You're even prettier than I expected. Nicholas always did have excellent taste in assistants." The emphasis on the word assistants was subtle but unmistakable. Sophia forced herself to maintain professional composure despite the clear challenge in Victoria's tone. "Ms. Ashford, is there anything I can help you with?" "Oh, darling, I think you've helped quite enough already," Victoria replied with a smile that was pure poison wrapped in silk. "Though I suppose I should thank you for keeping Nicholas entertained while I was in Europe. It's so important for him to have adequate distractions." Before Sophia could respond, Nicholas appeared in his doorway. His face was carefully blank, but she could see tension in every line of his body. "Victoria," he said, his voice carrying a warning that was lost on no one present. "I think we've covered everything we need to discuss." "For now," Victoria agreed, collecting her purse with theatrical precision. "But I'm back in Seattle permanently now, Nicholas. We'll have plenty of time to catch up properly." She moved toward D, the elevator with fluid grace, pausing only to deliver one final comment that felt like a stiletto between Sophia's ribs. "Enjoy the rest of your day, Sophia. Make sure to treasure these moments. They pass so quickly." The confrontation. After Victoria's departure, Nicholas retreated to his office without a word, closing the door with finality that felt like a wall being erected between them. Sophia stared at that closed door for 20 minutes, fighting the urge to knock, to demand explanations, to insist on clarity about what Victoria's visit meant for their relationship. Instead, she forced herself to wait. When Nicholas finally emerged at lunchtime, his expression was carefully neutral, but she could see storm clouds gathering in his gray eyes. "I need to speak with you," he said quietly. "My office. Now." Sophia followed him, her heart pounding with dread. As soon as the door closed behind them, Nicholas turned to face her, and she could see that whatever conversation he'd had with Victoria had shaken him to his core. "Victoria is back," he said unnecessarily. "I gathered that. What does she want?" Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, destroying its usual perfect styling. "It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated, Nicholas. I'm starting to think that's just an excuse you use when you don't want to tell the truth." The accusation hung in the air between them like a challenge. Nicholas stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. She wants to reconcile, he said finally. She's been in Paris for 2 years, working for her father's investment firm. She says she's ready to settle down, that she realizes what she gave up when she broke our engagement. And what did she give up? Security? Partnership? The life we had planned together. Sophia felt her heart cracking with each word. What kind of life? The kind appropriate for people in our position. Charity galas, business partnerships, strategic alliances between families. Nicholas's voice was flat, mechanical. The kind of life that makes sense. And what about what we have? Does that make sense? Nicholas was quiet for so long that Sophia wondered if he was going to answer at all. When he finally spoke, his words destroyed her. What we have is beautiful, Sophia, but it's not practical. Victoria and I share the same world, the same expectations, the same understanding of what our lives need to be. We're equals in ways that matter to people like my board of directors, my investors, my clients. People like your board of directors, Sophia repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. And what am I, Nicholas? What are we? You're extraordinary, you're brilliant and beautiful, and you challenge me in ways I never expected. But you're also my assistant, and I'm a CEO who inherited a company built on generations of careful image management. Some things matter whether we want them to or not. The words hit her like physical blows. Everything they had shared, every moment of connection, every whispered conversation about dreams and possibilities, all of it was being reduced to an inconvenient complication that didn't fit into his carefully ordered world. I see, Sophia said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded when her entire world was collapsing. So this was just a temporary distraction while you figured out your real life. That's not fair, isn't it? You kissed me, you told me I was important to you, you made me believe that what we had was real. And now you're standing there explaining why your ex-fiancé makes more sense than I do, because she comes from the right family and knows how to navigate charity galas. Nicholas stepped toward her, his expression pained. Sophia, you don't understand. The pressures I'm under, the expectations, I understand perfectly, she interrupted, backing away from him. I understand that when things get complicated, you choose the safe option. The one that looks good on paper and doesn't require you to risk anything real. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. It's exactly that simple. Sophia straightened her shoulders, calling on reserves of dignity she didn't know she possessed. You're a coward, Nicholas. You're brilliant and successful and utterly terrified of anything that might require you to be vulnerable. The accusation struck home. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I'm trying to protect both of us. You're trying to protect yourself. From criticism, from risk, from the possibility that caring about someone might cost you something. Sophia moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. I quit. Sophia, wait. No, I'm done waiting. I'm done making excuses for your fear. I'm done being your beautiful distraction while you figure out how to live the life other people expect from you. She opened the door, then delivered her final words without looking back. I hope your practical life with Victoria makes you very happy, Nicholas. You deserve exactly what you're choosing. Sophia cleaned out her desk in 15 minutes, packing her few personal belongings while trying to ignore the curious stares of her colleagues. Isabella appeared at her elbow, clearly distressed by this sudden development. Sophia, what happened? Can we fix this? There's nothing to fix, Sophia replied, surprised by how calm she sounded. This was always temporary. I just didn't realize how temporary. She walked out of Romano Industries without looking back, carrying a small box of belongings and the shattered remains of her faith in fairy tale endings. The elevator ride to the ground floor felt like descending from a dream into harsh reality. That evening, sitting in her apartment with Camilla fussing over her with ice cream and terrible romantic comedies, Sophia finally allowed herself to cry. Not for the job she had lost or the professional opportunity she had given up, but for the man she had glimpsed beneath Nicholas Romano's perfect facade. The man who had shared his dreams and fears with her, who had made her believe that love could overcome practical considerations. "He's an idiot," Camilla declared, waving her spoon for emphasis. "A rich, gorgeous idiot, but still an idiot." "He's practical," Sophia corrected. "He's choosing the life that makes sense for someone in his position." "Since when do you care about what makes sense? You're the woman who convinced a CEO to hire her after ruining his shirt. You don't do practical." Sophia smiled despite her heartbreak. "Maybe it's time I learned." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't true. She had never been practical, had never chosen the safe path when the interesting one was available. The problem wasn't that Nicholas had chosen practicality over love. The problem was that she had believed he was capable of choosing differently. The realization. 3 days after Sophia's resignation, Nicholas sat in his pristine office and tried to convince himself that he had made the right choice. Victoria had been everything she promised: beautiful, sophisticated, perfectly suited to the role of CEO's wife. She had already begun planning charity events, discussing strategic partnerships between their family's companies, and designing a future that looked exactly like the life he was supposed to want. But every morning when he arrived at the office and saw the empty desk where Sophia should have been, he felt like something essential had been torn away from his carefully ordered world. Her replacement, a competent woman named Margaret who came with impeccable references, was everything an assistant should be. Professional, efficient, completely forgettable. Nothing like Sophia, who had challenged him daily, who had seen possibilities. He missed who had made him laugh in ways he had forgotten were possible. "You look terrible," James Romano observed, appearing in Nicholas's office doorway on Friday afternoon. Nicholas's younger brother was everything Nicholas was not: casual, warm, completely unconcerned with corporate image. He worked as a landscape architect, designing gardens and parks that brought beauty into ordinary spaces. "I look fine," Nicholas replied, not bothering to look up from his computer screen. "You look like someone who hasn't slept in a week and has been living on coffee and regret." James settled into one of the visitor chairs without invitation. "I heard Victoria's back." News travels fast. Bad news always does. "Are you really considering taking her back?" Nicholas finally looked up at his brother, noting the concern in James's eyes. "Why wouldn't I? We were good together. We made sense." "You made sense the way a business merger makes sense. All the right pieces in all the right places, but no actual life to any of it. Not everything needs to be a grand passion, James. No, but something should be, at least once in your life. Something should matter enough that you're willing to fight for it." Nicholas thought about Sophia's final words, about the way she had looked at him before walking out of his life. He had seen disappointment in her eyes, but also something worse: pity, as if she had finally understood exactly what kind of man he really was. "I also heard you lost your assistant," James continued. "The one who lasted longer than a month. People are calling it a miracle." "She found a better opportunity." "Did she? Or did you do something stupid that drove her away?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Nicholas had spent days trying not to think about his last conversation with Sophia, about the way she had called him a coward with surgical precision that had cut right to the heart of his fears. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Everything's complicated until you decide it doesn't have to be." James leaned forward, his expression serious. "I've spent my whole life watching you choose duty over happiness, responsibility over dreams. When are you going to choose something for yourself?" "This company will survive without you being miserable," James interrupted. "Mom and Dad built Romano Industries, but they're gone. This is your life now, Nicholas. Stop living it according to their expectations and start living it according to your own." After James left, Nicholas found himself staring out at the Seattle skyline, thinking about architecture and dreams deferred. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a folded piece of paper, a sketch he had drawn years ago of a building that existed only in his imagination. It was a library, all soaring lines and natural light, designed to be a sanctuary where people could lose themselves in stories and possibilities. He had carried this sketch for 10 years, a reminder of the man he had once wanted to be. The grand gesture. Saturday morning found Nicholas standing outside Sophia's apartment building, holding a cup of coffee from the same shop where she had bought the fateful Americano that had changed both their lives. He had been standing there for 20 minutes, trying to find the courage to go upstairs, to face her after the way their last conversation had ended. When she finally emerged from the building, wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look impossibly young and beautiful, she stopped short at the sight of him. "Nicholas, what are you doing here?" "Bringing you coffee," he said, offering her the cup with a tentative smile. "Colombian beans. The barista assured me they're excellent." Sophia stared at him for a long moment, then accepted the coffee with obvious reluctance. "If you're here to offer me my job back, I'm here to apologize," he interrupted, "and to tell you that you were right about everything." Everything. I am a coward. I did choose the safe option because I was terrified of risking something real, and I've spent the last week realizing that practical choices don't mean much when you're miserable. Sophia sipped her coffee, studying his face with the careful attention she had once reserved for his business correspondence. "What about Victoria?" "Victoria wants the life she thinks I should want, the life I thought I was supposed to want." Nicholas stepped closer, his voice dropping to the intimate tone he had used during their stolen dinners. "But I don't want that life, Sophia. I want the one where I get to see you every morning, where I get to watch you solve impossible problems with creativity I never imagined, where I get to kiss you without worrying about what anyone else thinks." Nicholas. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "I love you," he said simply. "I love your stubbornness and your intelligence, and the way you refuse to be intimidated by anyone or anything. I love that you derailed my perfectly ordered life and made me remember what it feels like to want something just because it makes me happy." Tears gathered in Sophia's eyes, but she didn't speak. "I know I hurt you. I know I chose fear over love, and I know that might be unforgivable. But if you're willing to give me another chance, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you're more important to me than anyone else's expectations." Sophia set down her coffee cup and looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. "What exactly are you asking me, Nicholas?" "I'm asking you to marry me," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Not because it makes sense, not because it's practical, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it." The ring was perfect, a simple solitaire that caught the morning light like captured starfire. But more than the ring, it was the look in Nicholas's eyes that took her breath away. Gone was the careful control, the professional distance, the fear of vulnerability. In its place was pure, honest love, and a hope so fragile it made her heart ache. "You hurt me," she said quietly. "I know. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I was just a temporary distraction until someone more suitable came along." "You're everything," Nicholas said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're brilliant and beautiful, and you challenge me to be better than I ever thought I could be. You're not a distraction from my real life. You are my real life." Sophia studied his face, seeing the man she had fallen in love with during late-night conversations and stolen moments of honesty. "What about your board of directors, your investors, all those people who expect you to marry someone from the right family? They can expect whatever they want. I'm choosing you. And Victoria is part of a past I'm ready to leave behind." Nicholas took her hands in his, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. I spent so many years living according to other people's plans that I forgot I had the right to make my own choices. You reminded me that the only person's approval I really need is my own. And mine, Sophia said with the ghost of a smile. And yours, he agreed. So what do you say, Sophia Chen? Will you marry a reformed coward who's finally learned the difference between what makes sense and what makes him happy? Sophia looked down at the ring, then back up at Nicholas's face. She could see her future in his eyes, not the careful, practical future she had been taught to want, but something wild and uncertain and absolutely perfect. Yes, she said, laughing as he slipped the ring onto her finger. But I have some conditions. Anything. First, I want a job at Romano Industries that has nothing to do with being your assistant. I want to work in marketing where I can use my actual skills and education. Done. You can start as marketing director on Monday. Second, I want you to take that architecture class you've been thinking about. Part-time, just for fun. Because dreams deferred don't have to be dreams denied. Nicholas's smile was radiant. I actually enrolled yesterday. Classes start next month. And third, Sophia said, rising up on her toes to loop her arms around his neck. I want you to kiss me right here on this sidewalk, in front of anyone who cares to watch, because I'm tired of hiding how much I love you. Nicholas didn't need to be asked twice. He kissed her with all the passion and tenderness he had been holding back, pouring months of suppressed emotion into the connection between them. Around them, Seattle continued its Saturday morning routine, but for Sophia and Nicholas, the world had narrowed to this single, perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said again, as if the words were new and miraculous. I love you too, Sophia replied, even if you are the most stubborn, complicated man I've ever met. Good thing you're even more stubborn. The best thing, she agreed, pulling him down for another kiss. Epilogue, 6 months later. The Romano Industries annual charity gala was the social event of the Seattle season, held in the ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across walls draped in silk, while servers moved through the crowd offering champagne and canapes that cost more per bite than most people spent on lunch. Sophia Romano, she still felt a thrill every time. She heard her new name, stood near the windows overlooking Elliott Bay, wearing a dress that had been featured in 3 different fashion magazines. The emerald green silk complemented her engagement ring and wedding band perfectly, but more importantly, it made her feel confident and beautiful as she navigated the complex social dynamics of Seattle's elite. Mrs. Romano, a voice said behind her. And she turned to find Victoria Ashford approaching with a smile that was only slightly less venomous than it had been 6 months ago. You look lovely this evening. Marriage certainly agrees with you. Thank you, Victoria. You look well, too. Victoria had taken Nicholas's rejection with the grace of someone accustomed to getting her way eventually, if not immediately. She had moved on to pursuing a tech entrepreneur who was reportedly worth even more than Nicholas, though Sophia suspected the pursuit had more to do with pride than genuine affection. I have to admit, I didn't think it would last, Victoria continued, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp. The whole Cinderella story seemed rather unstable. Fairy tales have a way of working out when both people want them to, Sophia replied evenly. Though I suppose the real magic is in choosing love over convenience. Before Victoria could respond, a familiar arm slipped around Sophia's waist. Nicholas appeared at her side, impeccable in his tuxedo but wearing the relaxed expression that had become his default since their wedding. Victoria, he acknowledged politely. I hope you're enjoying the evening. Of course. Your wife was just telling me about the magic of choosing love over convenience. Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. Such a romantic perspective. The only perspective that matters, Nicholas replied, his arm tightening slightly around Sophia's waist. If you'll excuse us, I promised my wife a dance. He guided Sophia toward the dance floor, where couples moved in elegant circles to music provided by a string quartet. As they settled into the familiar rhythm of a waltz, Sophia felt the same flutter of happiness that had surprised her every day since their wedding. Was she bothering you? Nicholas asked, his hand warm against her back. Nothing I couldn't handle. Though I think she's still convinced our marriage is some kind of elaborate joke that will end badly. Some people can't imagine choosing happiness. Over status, Nicholas said, spinning her expertly through a turn. Their loss. Sophia smiled up at her husband, still amazed by the transformation in him over the past months. The careful control had been replaced by genuine contentment, the rigid perfectionism tempered by a willingness to take risks for the things that mattered. He had started his architecture classes and discovered a talent that had been dormant for years. He still ran Romano Industries with the same brilliance and dedication, but now he also made time for dreams and possibilities. Any regrets? She asked, echoing a question they had posed to each other regularly during their engagement. Only that it took me so long to realize what I wanted, Nicholas replied, lowering his head to brush a kiss against her temple. What about you? Just one, Sophia said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I really loved that coffee I spilled on your shirt. I should have asked what brand it was before I ruined it. Nicholas threw back his head and laughed, a sound of pure joy that drew smiles from other couples on the dance floor. I'll buy you a case of that coffee for our first anniversary. Deal. But this time, I promised to drink it instead of wearing it. Where's the fun in that? Nicholas asked, pulling her closer as the music swelled around them. Some of the best things in life start with a little chaos. As they danced, surrounded by Seattle's social elite, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had walked into Romano Industries desperate for any job, armed with nothing but determination and a willingness to take risks. She had found something she had never dared to hope for, a love that was passionate and practical, challenging and comfortable, absolutely perfect in its beautiful imperfection. The music ended, but Nicholas didn't release her immediately. Instead, he looked down at her with an expression that still made her pulse quicken. Ready to go home, he asked. With you? Always. Hand in hand, they made their way through the crowd of Seattle's most powerful and influential people, but they might as well have been the only two people in the world. They had chosen each other over every practical consideration, every social expectation, every safe and sensible option, and they had chosen correctly. The end no one could last a month with the ruthless CEO until the most stubborn girl walked in and changed everything. Sometimes the best love stories begin with the worst first impressions, and sometimes the most impossible people are exactly what we need to become who we're meant to be.